Hey everyone, today we're going to be ranking all 24 of the current Dead by Daylight killers from least to most fun. This will probably be one of the most subjective lists I've ever made, so if you don't agree with what I say, be sure to drop your own list or thoughts down below. For this list, I'll be splitting the killers into one of four tiers. The first tier is the Z tier, or the triple Z tier, for the killers who I find extremely boring to play as. The generally boring tier for killers that I'll play most matches with and moderately enjoy them. We then have the can go either way tier for killers who are just in the middle. Often fun for those who are often fun. And finally, almost always enjoyable for the killers who I have the most fun with. So starting off in the triple Z tier, we have the Nightmare. Freddy is probably the best example of a boring killer, offering no challenge and leaving little room for interesting play. His power is a massive snooze fest, and since his nerf, he isn't even that fun to jump on if you've had a chain of bad games to just have one easy one. He is just the epitome of mind-numbing play. Okay, that's it for that tier. On to generally boring. First killer in the generally boring tier we have Doctor, who I've always found to be quite boring just for the fact that it feels like playing him is just a chore almost, constantly shocking, constantly hearing screams. I don't know, it gets annoying after a while. His power, the main thing that is meant to engage you, is just dull. There's pretty much one strategy with Doctor, and that's just spam your shocks and try to time them to block pallets when possible. I've had fun games as Doctor, but typically those games would be down to me using an interesting perk combination, or the survivors playing in an interesting way. Clown is up next, and the killer I don't mind too much as long as I don't play him a lot. His power is just very boring still though, as there isn't much to be done with it. And a lot like Doctor's, it's mostly just throwing your bottles followed by pre-drop pallets. His new yellow bottles I really don't find too interesting, nor do they really provide any new form of gameplay. So yeah, boring and generally pretty repetitive, but I do feel more rewarded by playing him well as he is on the weaker end of killers, so there's that I guess. Bubba's power is one that is just so dull. With his charges, since his rework he's definitely been improved upon, but there's still so many games where he's just so dull to play as. As most games, survivors won't stay close together when facing a Bubba. You'll basically never get those fun moments when multiple survivors go down in one sweep, and if you do, it feels more like the survivors misplaying than you doing something well. I do think there are interesting and engaging aspects to him though, such as his movement within indoor structures, with the danger you can cause for the survivors despite having to be so careful. That's a nice balance, I feel. Next up we have the twins. I really want to like the twins more, but man are they just so dull. With their core strategy relying solely on making the other side not have fun by slugging. I get that there's other ways to play them, but I find there's no desire to engage further with the twins because it feels like you're being punished for trying to play in an interesting way. I like Victor and his fast movement and huge leaps. I think that's probably the most fun aspect of the twins, but I can't help but feel these two just aren't wasted potential. I can have fun with them, but it's like a couple games before it begins getting miserable. This killer has a great concept, but was poorly designed and neglected since their release. Spirit, quite simply, I find boring for the sole reason that I don't feel rewarded by playing her well, because I know it is broadly down to her mechanics being largely in my favour and there being very little counterplay for the survivors to act on. Yep, that's about it. There are times when she's fun to play, but it goes up to about a game before I find her quite boring. Which is a shame because her power is interesting, but I just don't feel the reward element of good play is there. Legion I honestly think is one of those killers where there's just not much going on, but I kinda like that because it means you can play a relatively interesting M1 game, but with these small moments of faster speed and easier injured states. Legion still misses something that makes them more than just an M1 killer though. They just have the one extra state of a quick M2 before going into M1. The Legion can be beat easily if survivors spread out and just don't heal. I still generally can have some fun games with Legion though, probably for the speed element and the slightly more interesting movement. Okay, onto the can go either way tier. Starting off this tier we have the Nurse, who I am honestly not very good with, but I do find rewarding when I play her well despite this. Nurse's power is one of those ones that is either extremely punishing if you're bad with it, or extremely rewarding if you're good with it. I think she can be pretty fun to learn, but for me I've also found it to be pretty tough and quite often frustrating, so I don't tend to play her, so typically when I do, I can go either way for having fun or not. Trickster I think I can find fun just due to his power being so colourful and the actual character of the Trickster being quite engaging. I do however think that his power can be frustrating and quite underwhelming. Depending on the map though, and with the right build, Trickster can be a lot of fun. going around spamming your throwing knives, trying to catch the survivors out on loops, is something I think is quite enjoyable. There is also sometimes though when I'll just get absolutely battered with him even when I play well, so I think the issue is his lack of power and the fact that it's honestly not at all rewarding as the knives seem inconsistent. Hag is a character that is so powerful it can often be hard to play her too much. Is a bit like Spirit. I think once you get good with her it's a little too easy as her traps are just so strong. However, she is fun to play as, and there's nothing more satisfying than trapping a survivor team in a set area, teleporting from trap to trap as you slowly take them down. Again though, another situation of too much of her can get boring, but once in a while she can be fun. Really it can go either way because obviously downing everyone and slugging them game after game just isn't really that fun for you or the survivors. Plague is a killer I like quite a bit and I find her fun to play mostly due to her pretty unique power. I like the differentiated projectile of Plague's vomit and the two different forms of sickness, which can let you play in pretty interesting ways and are also just fun to use. I do however think that the repetition of Plague can get boring, game after game having to infect survivors and go through that whole routine. Basically she's fun but she can get tiring to play over and over due to the constant setup required, which often isn't all too interesting, especially when facing competent survivors who can easily counter you. So games with Plague can really go either way. There's something about Ghostface that just makes him pretty fun most of the time. I think it's broadly the stealth element and being able to crouch and properly sneak around without too many restrictions, and the actual feeling of greater power when in this stealth mode. Again, the movement is a big element here and just shuffles up the gameplay. Playing Ghostface is a different experience than a lot of the other killers and requires a different approach, which honestly makes him interesting. Not a killer I would play too much, but when I do, he can be pretty fun a good amount of the time. It feels bad to put Nemesis this low, but he really isn't too interesting in terms of power. I always find the leveling up of the tentacle quite tedious every game, although once it is leveled it can be a lot of fun to play him. I think there are interesting elements to the Nemesis and there's fun moments caused by the zombies. I also just think the whole tanky aspect of Nemesis makes him a lot of fun. Going around and just using your fists as your weapon is pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know, he can honestly go either way though really. Onto the often fun tier. Since Wraith's rework and his extra movement speed when cloaked, he is so much more viable now and as a result a lot more fun. You can make a much wider range of plays now with him and generally just have a more balanced game against the survivors without feeling too weak. I love the semi-stealth element of Wraith and how a lot of his power is down to using it not so much for direct attacks sometimes, but using the invisibility to body block or being sneaky and getting ahead without the survivor knowing. Also he's still a bit of a challenge which I like. Myers I like a lot and I think his scaling gameplay from low power to high power is great and a ton of fun. I also think that Myers is one of the most atmospheric killers in the game and can create chilling moments and often jump scares for the survivors, which you can cause even more of by running certain add-ons. Add-ons are also a huge strength for Myers, with lots of fun ways to play him. I don't like facing him much admittedly, but purely from a killer perspective, I enjoy playing him most of the time. His only downside is that he is pretty weak to be honest, especially against efficient teams. Hillbilly is fun quite simply because he is one of the more balanced killers currently in the game. When I play as him, I feel that my outplays are earned and the survivors' counters are deserved. It feels rewarding to do well with him because it actually feels like it's down to you and not just because of a really good power or something. Also his chainsaw is a lot of fun. You can do loads of stuff like gliding over structures and getting cool cross-map chainsaw snipe runs. Only downside for Billy is that often indoor maps make him pretty damn miserable. Pyramid Head is a killer I like a lot because I find his power very satisfying and rewarding when you play him well. For some reason, even when I do poorly with him, which of course does happen, it doesn't really bother me too much because I just enjoy his character and how his power works. One of the most satisfying things in the game to me is landing a really precise punishment of the damn shot, or when you're lucky getting collaterals and stuff. I also think the differentiated cages and the fact he can do his mini Mori at the end of the survivor's third hook stage is pretty cool. Execution I've always found to be a very satisfying killer, and one which I often have fun with. Trapper is here solely for the element of difficulty and challenge and his gameplay being truly satisfying, especially when you manage to pull off multiple traps. Can he be frustrating when it comes to trap spawns and RNG? Sure, but I think the rewarding side of Trapper is also greater than the frustration side of him. There's nothing better than placing a great trap and hearing it snap shut as someone gets caught, especially when you manage to herd a survivor into a certain area. This one is going to vary a lot from person to person, but I personally love Trapper's gameplay. Huntress is a character who can be a lot of fun due to her hatchets. Generally she just offers a different kind of gameplay. Something more satisfying than landing a punishment of the damn shot is landing good hatchet shots and getting that satisfying sound that comes with them. This is a killer who I think is also very rewarding for those who play her well. Winning with her never feels like a freebie, but down to your good aim and ability to zone survivors despite having very little map pressure as a character. Only downside is her dodgy hitboxes, which can both work in your favor and against it. Pig is probably the most rewarding killer when it comes to that feeling you get when a game seems lost and you pull it back. That's what I love about Pig. Pig, I also think she has a cool power and there's plenty of interesting things to be done with it, along with her ambush attack and ability to crouch. I really like the killers who have a lot of little powers that all combine up into a singular pretty cool kit. A lot like Trapper, I think the satisfaction for Pig comes through playing a tough killer well, and often enjoying a game even when it's lost. There's just a few frustrations that don't quite make her in the top tier, like RNG, etc. Okay, moving on to almost always enjoyable. First up we have Deathslinger. This one is going to be controversial because Deathslinger is probably one of the least fun killers to play against, but I honestly feel that playing him is always an enjoyable experience, which creates a problematic issue when it comes to him as a character if only one side is having fun. Anyway, a core element to Slinger being fun is that his power is just a pretty entertaining one. Going around with a spear gun and reeling people in after shooting them is surprisingly engaging and can provide for plenty of moments where a well-placed shot can win you a game. Deathslinger is another one for the whole thing of just providing different gameplay. Also, his whole aesthetic or vibe is just kinda cool. Demogorgon, in my opinion, is the most balanced killer currently in the game, and I think this makes him incredibly fun for both sides. As killer, there's basically never a game where I don't enjoy playing Demo. Its power isn't particularly complex, and it's not all that challenging, but it still feels rewarding to use it well on loops, or when you use portals in sneaky ways, it can be a lot of fun. And basically, Demo is balanced and it shows. It's a well-designed killer, and as a result, a fun one that doesn't break new ground really, but does feel engaging and enjoyable regardless, partly due to that simplicity. I used to greatly dislike Blight, but after putting a decent amount of hours into him, I find him so fun. It might just be that there is so many killers in the game that are slow, but one thing I love about Blight is just the immense speed you can get to, especially with the increased speed add-ons. Blight is also a killer that's very rewarding to get good with, as he's a killer that concerns you with the maps and their layouts and the individual tiles and such. It's not just about a moonwalk every now and then, it feels like there's quite a bit more strategy, but this strategy is also mixed in with smacking into trees and sprinting at people in full force. There's this serious tactical element to him, but also a silly and enjoyable one, which makes his gameplay both fun and rewarding to learn and improve with. Oni is one of the only characters who can consistently hold my attention, and I can enjoy with ease without having to try too hard with different combinations or strategies. By its nature, I think Oni's power is just very fun. To me, he's like a perfected version of Maya's gameplay, with the weak start and average strength without your power, but high strength when you have it, with plenty of times for it to be used also. There's something about the flow of Oni's gameplay that just works so well. It feels like a constant wind up and burst of speed before winding down again and having to briefly work back up to that power stage, but it feels like something that's always attainable as long as you play well. It's a power that rewards you for playing well, but it isn't all too punishing if you have a bad game, allowing you to still get some playtime in with it regardless. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and please do drop your own thoughts down below. Thanks, and goodbye.